And now a very important subject, which is cybersecurity. Our next speaker will try to explain what is trust in the modern online world. She is a researcher in the cybersecurity research group at Nokia Bell Labs. She's an expert in using trusted computing technologies to create a trustworthy telco cloud and using root cause analysis techniques to diagnose and mitigate trust failures. And now with a presentation, What is Trust? Baby Don't Hack Me from Espoo, Finland, let's welcome Gabriela Limonta.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. As Alina said, I'm Gabriela, and I'm going to talk to you about cybersecurity today, or at least my small area of cybersecurity. So, for those of you who might be confused about my title, that's actually a callback to the famous Hathaway song, "What is Love?" So, if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest you look for it, and then maybe my title makes a bit more sense. But this is me. I am Gabriela, and I am originally from Venezuela, but I've been living in Finland for 4 years now. And I am both a computer and a communications engineer. Nowadays, I work as a security researcher. And the main thing you need to know about me is that I am not an expert, and I will never claim to be one. I just really want to learn new things. So, a little bit about my journey into cybersecurity. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago what was my dream job or where do you see yourself in 5 years, cybersecurity wouldn't have been the answer to that. I think my journey into this field has been a mix of curiosity and serendipity. So I've always been very curious to try out new things. When I started studying, I went to school for computer science, and I thought, well, I'll study computer science and I will become a software engineer probably. And then along the way, I had an exchange year in Germany, and there I started looking at some more math-oriented things and formal methods, and I thought, hey, this is interesting. Let's see where it leads. And I wrote a thesis about it. And then after that, I started getting interested in telecommunications. And at the same time, I moved to Finland and I started studying communications engineering. And I started working at Nokia. And during my job in Nokia, in the business side, there came an opportunity to do a feasibility study for some security new technologies. And I thought, hey, how about that? Let's take a look. So eventually, that is how I found my place as a researcher into cybersecurity. And why I think it's important to mention this is because a lot of the people I talk to in this area seem to have a similar story. It seems that not many of the cybersecurity people set out to go straight to cybersecurity. Many of us try out different things before kind of settling here. So when I started working in cybersecurity, this is what I thought it would be like. I thought in the first day you get a hoodie and you get a dark room where you hack all day in front of a screen and you get to do really, really cool hacking things, like, I don't know, in a movie. But to be completely honest, this is how my job makes me feel most days. That's a picture of me back in the 90s with my first computer. And I mostly feel like this because in my team, I am, first of all, the only woman, and second of all, the youngest member. I am trying out new things, and the imposter syndrome kicks me in very hard. Because the toughest part of research, and at the same time, what I love the most about it, is that there are no answers. It's not like a regular project that you usually have a goal and you go towards it. Instead, you have to come up with the solutions yourself. And if you go and ask your supervisors or other people, they don't know. It's our job to figure it out. So what I'm going to talk about today is about my work in trusted computing, which is a really small area of security. And to talk about trusted computing, I need to talk about trust. And trust can be defined in its most basic form as the expectation that something or someone will behave in a particular manner for a specific purpose. In computers, usually behavior is dictated by software. But before we get into trust on computers, I want to talk about trust in humans, because trust is something that we do unconsciously. So let's take this example. Let's imagine I have a secret and I want to share it with someone. My action is to share or to not share my secret. And my action will come from how much I trust the recipient of my secret. For example, in a relationship with my best friend, there's trust established there. I know her and I know that she will behave in the correct way, which is keeping my secret. So that influences my action and I tell her my secret because I know she's going to keep it. If you bring a stranger into the picture, I have no trust about the stranger because I don't know how they will behave if I tell them a secret. So that influences my actions. That means maybe I don't tell them the secret, or I tell them and then I gather information about whether I can trust them in the future or not. And finally, there's a different kind of trust, which I imagine you might be familiar with. For me, the clearest example is that aunt in your family that's very gossipy, or a friend in the friend group that you know that as soon as you tell them something, by the end of the next hour, everyone else in the group or in the family knows it. So there's a different kind of trust there. I trust my gossipy aunt to tell my secret to other people. And since that is not a behavior I want, that influences my action to not tell her my secret. So there's these three different kinds of trust. And the main question is, well, how can we translate this into computers? So if in computers the behavior is dictated by the software, meaning that computers behave as they are programmed to behave, we need to know that our computers are programmed correctly or programmed to behave correctly. And my research goes around, well, how to know that this happens. If you take, for example, my laptop, how do I know that my laptop is not recording my video when I don't explicitly ask it to use the camera? How do I know that my phone is not sending my location to some third-party servers if I'm not explicitly asking for it to do it? Or I have a sports tracker in my hand. How do I know that it's reporting the correct heartbeat or the correct step count? So these are all very interesting questions that we should ask ourselves. And my first example is maybe the simplest one. How would I trust my computer? This is what my computer looks like. And I first of all trust it because it looks different from anyone else's computer. It's filled with these completely ridiculous stickers, so it's very easy to find it. But if we talk about software and trust in computers, if I want to trust my computer as a whole, it helps if I break it down in several components. So at the lowest layer, I would have all the hardware. That would be my screen, my speakers, my camera, my motherboard, my graphics cards, all of these things that actually give my computer computing power. Then there's a firmware, which is the lowest piece of software or code that controls the hardware. That's what lets me use the camera to talk to you today and the microphone and all these hardware that my computer has. And then there's the operating system, which we're all familiar with, whether that's Windows or Linux or Mac. And then there's your regular applications. So in order for me to trust my computer as a whole, I need to trust each one of these components, trust that they are behaving correctly. And the big problem is that software controls all my devices, and software can be modified. And you might be wondering, well, how can software be modified? How would this happen? And let me talk to you about a very simple example. If we wouldn't be in the COVID-19 times, I would have probably traveled to Poland to give this conference, right? And I would probably be staying at a nice hotel room. I would probably travel a couple of days in advance or a day in advance. And by the time I got there, I would be probably tired and hungry. And anyone that knows me knows that when I'm hungry, I'm not a real person. I get very grumpy, so I need to get food fast. So I would probably go away from my hotel room and leave my laptop somewhere. During this time, anyone with access to my room, for example, cleaning personnel or hotel personnel, could come into my room with a USB stick with an exploit and plug it into my machine and change one of my software components. By the time I'm back from having my nice pizza or whatever I chose to eat that evening, I might think that everything is okay. I would I wouldn't have a way to know that something had been modified, even if in the background something in my computer would be behaving differently. And this is actually a real attack. This is called an evil maid attack. And fun fact, this is a term that was coined back in 2009 by a Polish security researcher called Joanna Rutkowska. And I really hope I'm not mispronouncing that name, but she's really awesome and you should check her work. But this is a real attack threat. And you might be thinking now, well, that's easy, Gabriela. Just don't leave your laptop in the bedroom or take it with you. Duh. But what I want to convey to you is that, well, it's not just USB sticks now. This term was coined back in 2009. Now we have all sorts of different attack vectors to change software in computers. Among them, there's weak update mechanisms, people using bad passwords, there's physical access, like in this kind of attack, there's social engineering, phishing, malware. There's many different ways that software modifications can get into your machine. And you might be thinking, well, don't think that you're so important. Your laptop is not really critical. The world is not going to end if your laptop gets modified. And you're right. But let's consider a more critical scenario. Let me introduce you to Jane. She's a patient with diabetes. And diabetes is this condition or disease where your pancreas cannot produce enough insulin to control your blood sugar levels. So usually patients with with diabetes, they have to measure their blood sugar levels with a glucose meter, and they have to put insulin into their blood when their sugar levels are below a certain threshold. So Jane is a very, very tech-savvy person. So she has this very fancy interconnected glucose meter and insulin pump. So for her, the way it works is that the glucose meter is automatically always measuring the blood sugar levels, kind of like my sports tracker. And it's reporting that measurement to the insulin pump. Then if the blood sugar is too high or too low, the insulin pump can change the dosage of insulin that it gives Jane. And all of this happens automatically for her. And this is a good setup that keeps Jane living a happier life than if she had to do this all manually. However, if an attacker modifies her glucose meter to send the wrong measurements of blood sugar levels, this could cause Jane's insulin pump to give her a lethal dose of insulin. Now, I don't want to be a fatalist or anything. This is a very extreme example, but it points to a bigger concern, which is the fact that interconnectedness allows the cyber world to affect the physical world. And this is where this matter of trusting computers and devices becomes really, really important. That's because it's not only the medical devices that are being connected to the internet, it's also your smart home, the smart fridges, temperature sensors, your smart coffee machine. It's also self-driving cars, trains, industries, factory robots. All of these things are being connected to the internet, which makes them vulnerable to attacks that modify their behavior. And since they interact with the physical world, they can have, well, critical consequences. So hopefully I've convinced you that trust is important. Now I'm going to tell you how we can build it into our devices and how can we check that our devices haven't been actually modified. And for this, we use this little chip on the screen called a trusted platform module. It's an untamperable cryptographic chip, and I know that that's a mouthful, but it's a little chip that's available in almost all computers and phones. It's technology that's almost as old as I am. And the main function it does is that it can securely store the state of my device. And later on, a third party can request that state and evaluate if it's trusted or not trusted, or if it has changed, basically. So the way we can use this to build trust in our devices is that if I have my computer from the first example we had, and we think of all of these components in my computer, the hardware, the firmware, operating system, and applications, what happens is that whenever I boot my machine, the system state of all of these components is stored in the cryptographic chip. later on, I can ask if this chip or if this computer can be trusted. And then if the state of my computer hasn't changed, I know that it will behave like I want it to. And then the answer is yes, I can trust it. And this is analogous to my best friend. I know that my best friend hasn't changed her personality. She still behaves like I expect her to. So I trust her and I share my secret. Then if anyone has modified any part of my computer, then the state in my chip would be different. And when I ask the question, hey, can I trust this computer? The answer would be no. And this would be kind of similar of either a stranger or me not telling my gossipy aunt about my secrets. So the really important thing in this research is that there is a way that if my device is modified, I can detect it and I can take actions towards this to either fix it or not use that device. The important thing is that I can detect it. So this concept is important because this works all the way from my personal computer to large interconnected industrial robots or more critical applications. But it is important to note that the work here is far from done. There's still many challenges ahead. And the first ones I can mention off the top of my head are, for example, the supply chain. How do I know that someone hasn't modified my device or my computer before it even gets delivered to me? And this is more important for nation states actors. There's also how do we move this concept of trust into large-scale distributed system with massive interconnected Internet of Things devices and a bunch of sensors here and there monitoring everything? How can we extend trust so that we cover all of these systems? And then there's a topic of virtualization. You've probably heard about Docker and Kubernetes and containers and virtual machines. How do we extend this concept of trust to these virtualized entities? And that brings me back to challenges. These challenges are what make me excited to work on research. There's no answers for them. There's no right path, but I get to work on figuring out what the path might be. And that's what makes it super exciting to me. And to solve these challenges, these and any other challenges in cybersecurity, we need more curious people. I would say we need more curious women given this venue and because I'm a woman, but we really need more curious people here. And cybersecurity is a huge field. Today, I've just talked about my tiny little area of it. And one thing you might be thinking now is, hey, yeah, cool story, but how would I actually get started? How would I get my foot in the door to do this? And there's many ways. But one thing I would recommend is going to meetups. Find your local meetups in your area where they might be discussing cybersecurity or really any other technical topic you might be interested in. Then there might be people sharing the cool thing they did at work or during their hobby or free time. And that is a way of finding out what you might be interested in. And if you're more of a loner or you want to figure it out by yourself and don't want to go to meetups, there's this really cool GitHub repository called Awesome Hacking, which has a bunch of material to get started with different areas of cybersecurity. So I would strongly recommend you take a look at this and try out some of the things, and you might find your next hobby or your next career. It's interesting to look at and find out what piques your interest. So this is the end of my talk, and thank you so much for listening. That's my contact information in case you want to contact me after this. And right now, I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Gabriela, for making us aware of the risk. That was really great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.